Okay, here we are again. Lisa Illichmann, Sophie. Thank you for joining us for a second session of Mindfulness and Change. We're speaking from lockdown. I'm in Austria, Sophie's in France. Both of us are in lockdown. That means we're stuck in our dwellings, or I'm right now in the office. And we're discussing what happens in these situations. And this is our second video, and today Sophie's going to open. So I'm just going to stop talking for a moment.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here again. And we're trying to move on our exploration, not really knowing where we're heading at all. I've been like probably a lot of you, I've been spending a lot of time on internet lately. And I've come to see, of course, we're all preoccupied by the same thing. And a lot of us are trying, to help and support in many different ways. And I've noticed a lot of videos about how wonderful this situation is, how much hope there is, how the opportunity, to build up a better world is there, and which I found absolutely great. I mean, of course there is hope, of course there is an opportunity to change. But what I see first is that we have to go through this moment of crisis. Because we are going through a crisis. Okay, for some of us, it's maybe easy to be at home, but for some of us, it's not so easy. And just to be careful here, to go on to what was said yesterday is to really see how do we engage with things, how we projecting ourselves in the future just to avoid what is in front of our nose. That's really what I want to try to be cautious for myself here. How I have this tendency to move a little bit into future, just because I try to avoid the unpleasantness of this situation, to be stuck at home.
That is so true. That's very helpful. That's really very helpful what you just said with this moving into the future and projecting into the future. What does this mean? I think the being at home part, or being stationary somewhere in and of itself is not a problem. The problem is when we project into the psychological future, and what does this mean, and what will what's happening, and then we become very, very unhappy, because we notice that we have no control. We have no idea what's going to happen. And that's very disquieting. I'm sure you're noticing. I mean, we see this in internet now, and we feel it in ourselves. The tendency to project into the future. The tendency to not want to be in this moment, because this moment is not what we want. And we're afraid, if we're here and if we accept that, and if we just are in this moment, that maybe it'll never go away. Maybe things will never, maybe by accepting it, we're not just accepting it, we are making it our future.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I've noticed how, the tendency when we're facing change, when we're facing uncertainty, is it's almost automatic response we have is to cling. And as you were saying, what do we cling at? Yeah. We cling at what we want. We cling at what we don't want. Yeah. And for sure, the situation we are in right now certainly does not match with what we want, but more with what we don't want.
Yeah.
I guess that nobody wants to be stuck at home. I guess that nobody, is happy with not being free to move the way we would like to, whether it's to go outside for a walk with friends, meeting family, whether it's, I don't know, going shopping or whatsoever. And we really try, and to really, what I found very interesting here is really our tendency to try to control and to manipulate events. There is a reality, whether we like it or not, and upon that, we are trying, we are trying to make our own needs, our individual needs, our desire, whether we want or don't want something, we're trying to, we put so much emphasis, so much energy to trying to make them match with reality.
Yeah.
And I have an example that I use a lot when I teach. Some of you probably know it at all. And it's about my own experience. And I think it really makes it clear how we, most of the time, with very simple and things, we try to manipulate the situation because we want things to be otherwise than the way they are. And it was about a year ago. I was in a retreat center in the south of France. And before the yogi came, I decided to clean the courtyard, which was full of leaves. It was at autumn. And because I'm a little bit rigid, I decided to take a brush, to start to clean the courtyard and making some different piles of leaves. And it was kind of my Zen meditative practice. And I was very happy with the little, piles of leaves I made. And I don't know, after half an hour of this, the wind started to blow. And in 5 minutes, my full work was totally gone. All my piles of leaves were out, away. And what was very interesting is how I responded to that. And first, I did not realize what was happening. And I was, giving more energy, trying, to start again to make some pile of leaves. And after 5 minutes, I started to feel so tense in my shoulder, all my body was tensed. And then I start even to feel kind of in my mind, some irritation, almost not anger, but, kind of really being annoyed. And then I realized, I said, okay, Sophie, what's going on here? Let's stop. And I just stopped. And I said, okay. And I just, I did something very basic. I just started to be with the sensation of rigidity and tension in my shoulder. I started, and slowly in being with that and with this feeling of irritation in my body, kind of a heat up and burn in the stomach. Suddenly, something came up to my mind and I realized what was happening. And what was happening is that I was fighting against the conditions. The conditions were suddenly the wind blows. And I'm realizing that I have no control on that, whether I like it or not. The wind is there, it just take all the leaves away. And it's really with this example, what I try to show is really how we are trying, because I didn't like it. I wanted that what I've decided to do was done. I wanted to make my pile of leaves. I wanted the courtyard to be clean in order for when the yogis come, it's nice. And it's really here to see, the dichotomy there is between what I want, what I've decided how the thing should be, and the reality that does not depend on what I want or what I don't want. There are certain conditions that make this situation happening. Yeah. And how do I respond to it is my responsibility. Whether I fight, and when I fight, what do? I create more tension to something that is already unpleasant, or I see it for what it is. There is conditions that make the wind blow, and I just decide to laugh at it. Okay, it didn't meet my expectation. It didn't meet what I want, but it's okay. Yeah. It can be fine. And this example is really it's exactly the same with us, maybe stuck at home and not being able to do what we want to do. And how do we handle that? How with that? Can we see it when it's happening? Can we see or attempt, to try to manipulate and to wanting things otherwise than the way they are? And how much when we do that, actually, we suffer.
Yeah.
The situation that is already painful, we just add more suffering because we just do not allow it to be, just to be for what it is.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, lovely story. The wind is blowing right now. The wind is blowing, and what you say, sort of awakens in me the knowledge, which I can't always, of course, apply as well as I can tell other people to apply this. It's not the conditions that define our life, but it's the way we respond to them. And it's this, that you were talking about, this tension and this resistance to, I do not want it to be the way it is, but it is. It is. It just is. And no resistance is going to change that fact that right now in this moment, it is as it is. And in many moments, we can set very simple steps and change the situation. For example, if I'm standing in the sun and it's too hot, I can simply move out of the sun. I don't have to yell at the sun. I don't have to complain. I just move out of the sun. But right now we have very little opportunity to change what's happening to us. We're in one of those situations where you say there is no shade, really. So the best thing I can do is just remain as I am, lower my resistance. And I think in lowering my resistance, number one, I don't get that tension in my shoulder, which is very nice not to have that. I know this. I reduce the conflict potential in my family. And I see opportunities. I see new places, perhaps, of shade that I could go into. I can see, from your example, perhaps other things I can do with the leaves, or I just leave them. Maybe it's okay if I just leave the leaves. Or maybe we can do something else with the yogis with the leaves, or use the leaves then when the yogis come as a meditation, putting them together again in these beautiful Zen piles, which I'm sure I would have done too. I tend towards rigidity. And so I think for me, what I notice is this resistance, and this resistance is so painful. That's more painful than the condition itself.
Mm. And of course, we're not used to that. And that's one of the gifts of change, because so far we have seen that what is difficult with change, but actually it's also full of hope. Yes. Because when the wind of change blows, there is this opportunity to change as well.
Yes.
To change, and as you mentioned, to change the way we respond to things. Okay, we have no control on what is happening, or very little control, but we really have this great freedom as a human being to respond in a more skillful way, and we can learn to change the way we look at things. Yeah. And that, again, that's the gift of mindfulness, because there is nothing much to do, as I was describing in this example and the example you give. The key, the main thing to do is to stop, slow down, just to cultivate a kind of an inner space that will allow us to see what is going on, and not to see only with our head, with thinking, with reflecting, but really seeing in the immediacy of things. It's suddenly, oh, I stop. What's going on here? What do I feel? Oh, tension. And just sense this, experiencing it, and the very fact of just seeing it and being with it The understanding may come on its own. It's not you was trying to resolve it, because usually what you do with your mind is that when you look at things as it is a problem. So if there is a problem, there is a solution to find. And that's usually what we do with our head. But when we just open to what is, and we just, what is this? How does it feel? We're not getting a solution from thinking. It's the solution because we are welcoming what is here. We are really attuned to present with body and mind. And this is where there is the space for the emergence of an understanding that will arise. You're not getting an understanding outside there.
Yeah.
It arises from your ability to just be. Be with what is.
Yeah.
In this space that can embrace liking, disliking, not wanting this space. And this is what we cultivate when we come back to the breath, when we come back to listening, when we come back to the sensation of the body.
Yes, it's beautiful. Thank you. That moves me so deeply. That just so touches my own experience. And for me, you said if I only listen with the mind, I cannot really see or perceive what's happening. And because I'm so caught up in what I believe this means, that I cannot see what it really is. And the more I get lost in my concepts of what's happening, and then I take, and I can't know what the future brings because I've never been there. I don't know what the future has to offer. The only thing I can do is take things out of the past and throw them into the future and say, well, that's what's happening. And that's a closed loop system. That's all can only come from my conditioning. It can only come from the thoughts that I have already had. There's no new input if I don't enter the body. And I like using the term, anybody who's worked with me more often knows this typical, to enter the input channels, being my five senses. And by entering the input channels, I see afresh, I perceive anew, and I see suddenly new opportunities or new interpretations, new ways of dealing with what's now. And I don't have the past does not have to repeat itself. Things do not have to mean what they meant before to me. They don't have to. And I can create new habits in thought and in behavior by leaving the concepts of my mind and perceiving through my input channels just for a moment. And then suddenly new arises. And suddenly the okayness of the situation arises. And I'm not so caught in the past. And I'm not caught in the cycle of having to repeat the same thing, the same thoughts, the same habits, the same emotions again and again.
Mm. In one thing that maybe hasn't been said so far about this new way of engaging with reality this way is that this is something that can be done with care and kindness. Because when we start, when we're not trained, when we start to learn to really turn our attention within, what we will come to discover first is what we describe is our own difficulties, is our own habits of mind, is our own emotional habits. And of course, it's not gonna be always nice, and to be very careful the way we engage ourselves with this dynamic, to really bring care, to bring warmth, and really to bring kindness. We're not here to judge ourselves. We're all on the same boat. We're all vulnerable. We're all conditioned by our humanity. So we all experience that, but how can we be kind when we do this work?
Yeah.
Being kind and learning slowly to recognize where we are going to judge ourselves.
Yeah.
Because this is not helping. This is bringing, again, it's another attempt to fight with reality. The reality is that I'm learning to meet what it means to experience life as being human. And some things will be unpleasant.
Yeah.
Do I try to get rid of this unpleasantness? And on top, and building upon that, judgment, criticism, harshness? Or shall I meet it for what it is? Okay, that's where I'm standing now. How can I bring care and kindness for what I'm doing, and more maybe see that this is a progress, that you start to see things. And seeing things is the starting point. Is where it's going. It is seeing probably is what is going to condition your intention. Is what is going to condition your action, your deeds, your words. So there is really an extra care attitude that needs to be cultivated and developed in order to meet the reality within.
You said several words that resonate very deeply in me. And the one is seeing our patterns. I think the more we spend time not projecting into the future, but being here and being aware of our mental patterns and our behavioral patterns, the more we get to know our own conditioning, or to get to know, I like to use the term, to get to know our avatar. The mind-body thing that I inhabit. And getting to know it sometimes, the more we get to know about, the more we go, oh, the more I see about myself, the less I like myself. And I think many of us have been down this road. And then it's this, and you said to be kind to yourself, and to embrace your humanness. And it's a work in progress. It's this seeing your habits, I suppose. This is kind of my thing, how I like to work the most, is seeing my mental habits, seeing my physical habits, and somehow finding peace with that, embracing my own weaknesses, vulnerabilities, my own humanness, and finding that okayness. And the more I can do it with myself, the more I find myself able to do it with others. And this helps to reduce conflictual relationships, to help reduce unwholesome emotions and unwholesome exchanges with the ones that we love, which I'm now in these sorts of situations are the most difficult in our relationships right now. And additionally, the self-acceptance and this seeing often kind of feels like, well, if I see it, if I accept it, then I'm just being passive. I'm just going to, it's always going to be like this, I'm just rolling in my Maitri, I'm just really rolling in self-acceptance. And I don't think you mean coddling. It's seeing it and having empathy for the human condition, because all the things that we're going through, each person in the universe, or all people are going through this. And the seeing of it somehow just opens us up into right action, into positive action. It's not passivity. It's not having to do the same thing again and again and again, but seeing it, and suddenly new ways of acting appear, and new ways of thinking. I love when you smile.
Do we still have time? Or
Yes, we should slowly get into constructive thoughts. Just as a heads up for our listeners, Sophie and I are on a learning curve, and we're trying to make these dialogues as helpful for everybody as possible. And there's a difference, not really, but that we don't want to fall only into a philosophical discussion, but open up to applied philosophy, as it were, to an application of the Buddhist teachings, or it's also there the same as the Vedantic teachings, and to concretely and specifically find ways that we can, or explore ways that we can use to express this in our lives right now, in this moment.
so pragmatically speaking, I think to put into action what we've just shared here is really, the first thing is really to cultivate, our ability, a capacity to come back to the present moment, to here and now. As we said yesterday, it's very simple. It's coming back to your breath, coming back to listening to the sounds of spring, for example, or coming back to the sensation on the body. And yesterday you were saying about feeling, I think, the wind or the sun, just these little things. But it's not about, it's really about remembering to do that.
Yes.
And we are not really remembering to do that, not in waiting and without wanting to get something out of it.
Yeah.
But just remembering to come back and let the effect of that unfold freely. Again, we're not trying to control things here. We're trying to cultivate certain abilities, you know, in order to be more stable, in order to be more grounded, in order to learn more how to meet our inner experience, whether nice or whether not so nice, and how we can respond to it with more, maybe skillfulness, maybe more wisdom. So again, the exercise is really to come back. That's why we meditate. We can meditate formally on the cushion, but this is something we can do wherever we find ourselves in, whether we're washing the dishes, whether we're having a shower. When I'm having a shower, where is my mind? Am I thinking of something else? Or I'm really, with the sensation of the hot water on my body? Same when I'm washing a plate. Really the exercise is to remember. For me, that's the word, to remember.
Yes.
To be here.
Yes. And if we look at the true meaning of mindfulness, mindfulness really means to remember. To remember to be here. In the Western world, we've defined this perhaps a bit differently, but it's that act of remembering, that act, as you will, of waking up. I think many of us understand the concept of lucid dreaming, that when one is dreaming, you wake up suddenly in the dream. Some of us have experienced this. You wake up in the dream, but you remain in the dream state, but suddenly you become aware that, oh my God, I'm dreaming. And this is lucid waking, of waking up to what's going on right now, to waking up to what the thoughts are doing, waking up to what the hands are doing, what the skin is feeling, waking up to this moment. And the more often we can do this, the more we strengthen the muscle of mindfulness, of remembering, of coming back to right now. And none of this means passivity, and none of this means, oh, we have to say that this is what's happening is good. It's not good and it's not bad. It's a chance for us to deepen to wake up, to deepen our our experience of our lives.
Maybe it would be, some people might be interested that you or I do an online guided meditation, maybe.
This is a good idea. We'll
Yeah.
just,
This could be, complementary to what we are doing here. I don't know.
very nice idea. Very nice. We will plan something like that. Now we've been almost 30 minutes. I'm not quite sure because I forgot to be recording the time until a little bit into it. So I'm not quite sure how long we've been talking, but it's been close to 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think so too.
Thank you, Sophie. As always, very helpful for me. Gives me also the feeling that we spoke about this beforehand before we started recording. It makes me feel like I'm maybe doing something, and gives me myself a good feeling of reaching out and telling myself again all the things that I need to hear as well. So thank you, Sophie, and see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.